Hey guys, today I will be speaking about the attachment styles. This is Christine, your relationship and mindset mastery doctor and your leverage for change. And I'll be touching a little bit on on the four attachment styles, which is secure, anxious, the fearful avoidant, and the dismissive avoidant. But I'm going to be spending a little bit more time on the anxious preoccupied attachment style today. And I don't have a particular agenda today. I'll just be kind of going over the attachment styles, and hopefully you'll find something useful from what I have to say. So, there are some traits that when you're just dating that you will be able to see, because you're not going to, just like anybody else or anything else, it's difficult to kind of get a good feel of someone when you just started dating them, because as I've always said, dating is like you're going for an interview, especially those first couple dates, right? And what happens is that we put on a little performance thing, we're at our best, and so it's difficult to tell or to kind of have a good idea of who this person really is. So to say that, I'll say that to say that at the beginning of a date, if you're already seeing some really horrible red flags at the beginning, the first and second date, or those in the first month of dating, then I think that it's not wise to stick around, because if that's what they're offering at the beginning, then it only gets worse from there on. Okay, so let's speak about the secure attachment style, which is this style of the attachment style that we all are trying to get to. This adult at this time. They grew up in a family that tended to their needs. They cried their babies, they cried, and somebody was there to comfort them. The caregiver was loving and giving and tender and caring, and and they were dependable. They were dependable in their response to the baby. And so as these children grew up, they know that they could count on their caregivers to be there when they need them. And so as adults, they are very stable. They are consistent. They're balanced in their relationships, and they're really open to be vulnerable. They don't feel that it's a weakness to be vulnerable, because when they were vulnerable as children, they were able to cry and get their needs met. They did not feel as if they have to hide that vulnerability. They could be vulnerable and still get their needs met. And so as adults in adult relationships, they have no problem being vulnerable. And so they will be able to speak about deep emotional issues that they're having with their partner. They're able to open up to their partner and allow their partners to open up to them without any criticism, and just be there for them in their times of vulnerability as well. So this is the kind of attachment style that we all try to achieve, right? And remember now, just to be sure that you understand that every single attachment style is always on a spectrum. In that nobody is all the way over, like terrible, or the worst, or the least in that attachment style. There's always a spectrum, and as individuals grow and learn and become better, and as they have relationships, and as they have different life challenges, it can move along that spectrum. Okay, so the secure attachment style, as I said, is secure in who they are. They are comfortable. They're comfortable with being vulnerable. They are consistent. They're balanced. They don't need a lot of mollycoddling, because they are secure in who they are. They now compare that to the anxious avoidant attachment style, or anxious preoccupied, attachment style. What happens with this adult is that they have the tendency to be very clingy. Clingy because it's and it's funny, because it depends also on who that person is dating, who that person is with, because there's certain attachment styles that bring out that clinginess even more because of their response in the relationship to them. So, but usually the negative part of an anxious preoccupied attachment is that they appear very needy, very clingy. They love to have very close relationships with their partners. They want to know where they are, what they're doing. They want to be involved in every area of their lives. They're like, they want to feel as if they're a part of their lives. They want to, they have a tendency to seek validation from their partners because as I mentioned before, most of these attachment styles are formed as babies, as children, and so for the anxious preoccupied individual, what happens is that when they were babies, the caregivers were not consistent in their care for this baby. And so this baby never knew when it is that this person will turn up, their caregiver will turn up. They will cry and cry sometimes, and the person will be there. And next time they'll cry and nobody's around. There's nobody to take care of them, to feed them if they're hungry. And so the thing about it is they have this real fear of abandonment. They feel abandoned when they're not able to get, to have someone care for them or have someone there for them when they need them to be. And so this child, this baby grew up with this feeling, this fear of abandonment. So in childhood, they're always, if the person goes away and comes back, they cling on to that person because they're afraid that when they go away the next time they're not going to come back. And so this transfers into their adult relationships where they want their partner. They are very dependent on their partner for some kind of validation to make them feel loved, to make them feel happy. And so there's a lot of tension in the relationship because there is, especially depending on who they're in relationship with. Now, it's sad to say that a lot of anxious, preoccupied individuals, it's a tendency to repeat the experience of their childhood. And so they look for partners, they are attracted to partners who are not there for them. And it's nothing that is done by choice. It's just something that happens. And that's how you now have to grow to realize, what is it that I'm doing that's attracting these people, these same types of people as my parents or my caregivers were. And so what happens is that the anxious preoccupied individual gets attracted to somebody who's, say, for example, a fearful avoidant or a dismissive avoidant. And these people don't like to be, they don't like closeness. They're afraid of emotional, they don't deal with their emotions very well. And if there's an emotional issue that becomes too intense, they will run. They can't take that kind of emotional intensity. And so you can see how that can be a problem because the anxious preoccupied loves to be have that emotional contact with their partners, but the other two, the dismissive or the fearful avoidant, they're going to run away and they cannot give that kind of emotional support to the anxious preoccupied person. So this is why it's really best for the anxious preoccupied to be in a relationship with a secure individual. And just by being in a relationship with somebody who's secure, who is not afraid to be there for them, who is not afraid to love them the way they want to be, and they don't have any hang-ups about that. They're open and relaxed, and they're just open to loving the person that they're in a relationship with. Then after a while, this anxious preoccupied individual can become more secure because when they realize that anytime I need them, my partner is there, the secure individual is there for me, I can trust that. They get to trust that more and more. So now that I speak about the secure attachment, I've spoken about the secure attachment and the anxious preoccupied attachment style. Let me go a little bit into the dismissive, since I mentioned it, the dismissive avoidant attachment style. And these people, you will notice that they are not very, they don't connect well with their partners. You know, I mean, with anyone actually, they don't connect well, and you'll see that they may tune out of conversations really quickly. You know, they don't have that interest to really listen to you. They don't really care. They don't have that caring. They don't have that emotional intensity to be there with you in emotional times, right? So they will tune out of conversations. They're more abrupt. You know, they will on the phone. You know, they will feel as if they're not really listening. They're not really there for you. They're like they're there in front of you, but they're not there with you. Their attention is somewhere else. There is a certain type of coldness and dismissiveness about someone who is dismissive avoidant. And as I mentioned before, these attachment styles are formed in childhood. And so this is a protective, all of these habits that I mentioned, these characteristics of the dismissive avoidant, it was meant to protect them as children, as babies, because their caregivers, they were not there for them, right? And they were just not there for them. It could be that they grew up in a household with people who did drugs or people who worked a lot and they were just not there when they came home. They were tired and they didn't have time to play, or, you know, they really just love this little baby. And so they might give them toys or stuff to play. And so these babies learned how to self-soothe very easily. And so, you know, they're very comfortable being alone. And so in adult relationships, that kind of ability to cope by self-soothing now will be impacting this relationship, this new adult relationship. And of course, you know, in an intimate relationship, you want connection. And so if you're in a relationship with somebody who does not want to connect emotionally, there's going to be some type of issue for, especially if the person is secure or if they are or anxious preoccupied. And this, especially the anxious preoccupied, which I said before was always attracted to dismissives or avoidance, because it kind of played back into what they grew up with, and that's what they're used to. And so they tend to attract these people. So the dismissive avoidant, again, they tend not to open up too quickly. You always feel that there's a wall up between you and them. It's like they're never totally open. There's always something held back. They are a lot slower to warm up and they need a lot of space. You know, most times you might be doing very well and you think that this relationship is great and everything, and all of a sudden they just disappear. And without any excuse, any forewarning, they just, especially when the intensity of the relationship, emotional intensity is increased, whether it be that they feel that, you know, there's so much love that they can't believe it's true because, you know, they never had that in their childhood. So now there's a fear of that love being taken away. So before that can get hurt from that being taken away, they will leave and they will go off by themselves and you won't see them. Or if you're in a marriage, they will just be quiet and not really interactive. They'll just go out all the time. And so there can be issues in relationships because of this particular attachment style. Now, the fearful avoidant attachment style is similar, is a little different in that they kind of have the worst of both worlds of the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidant, in that they behave, they come on to you. The first time you see them, they'll be very outgoing, very fun-loving, very open, as an anxious preoccupied is. and very caring, and want to be involved in your interested in what you do and all that kind of stuff. So they come off as an anxious preoccupied at the beginning, but then when the emotion when the relationship gets really close and they can't take that, they now become afraid that this is not going to last because it never did before, they will leave. So now they take on the characteristics of the dismissive avoidance. So in the beginning they kind of flip-flop, so and when they go take on that characteristic of the dismissive avoidant, being cold and distant and want to be by themselves, and they can't take the emotional intensities, then they will go away. So it's like there's always, you may hear some relationships where they say it's hot and cold, hot and cold, and this describes this relationship with this someone with this attachment style very very well, because at one time they will come and they're there for you as an, especially when you're an anxious preoccupied, and then they disappear when things get too emotionally saturated or tough, or they can't deal with certain things. They can't deal with stuff like if you want to discuss something that's difficult, because they will just leave. They're not able to do that, and they won't. And if they even stay, you will notice that they're not really present. They're just there to satisfy you, if they can last that long, which is hard. It's hard for them. So most time they may be there for a couple minutes maybe, and then the emotional intensity gets too much, and then they will have to leave. They just cannot take it. And so these attachment styles can be changed, guys. It's not because remember, we can go back and try to know, do things like the person who is secure. Go back and work on, if the first step to any change is really becoming aware that there is a problem. If you're not aware that there is a problem because of maybe a lot of failed relationships in your past, and the fact that you just cannot seem to stay in a relationship, then you will never ever change. And so you'll take these issues from one relationship to the next. So really, guys, the best way to really solve any issue is to realize that there is a problem, and it was no fault of yours, no, but then now you're an adult, you can choose to change, right? So you can live a better and more productive life in your work. It affects everything in your work, but especially intimate relationships. So guys, I'm going to do another video which will, I should mention, for the fearful avoidant, in their childhood, there is a kind of a little bit of a difference in that they can be, they are like people pleasers. They can be people pleasers because they were kind of, maybe they were the oldest child, and so, or maybe their parents were always in some kind of a problem, whether they're drunk or they have some addiction. And so it's almost like the oldest child had to take over the parenting responsibility, parenting the parent, parenting the caregiver, parenting their younger siblings, because the parent just couldn't do it because they're always drunk or they're on drugs or they're not there, whatever the reason is. So this is the biggest difference between the dismissive avoidant and the fearful avoidant. The fearful avoidant usually has some kind of trauma around. It could be abuse. It could be sexual abuse, all different types of abuse, but they still needed their family. So they are very good at reading people, because they had to read your emotional response to be able to survive. If they see you coming and the parent is coming to beat them or something, they have to know they have to run, right? So it's very they have a difficult, I believe one of the most difficult challenges in trying to make changes, but it can be done because of all of these the abuse, and maybe just the fact that they became parents before, with their children, trying to, and so by the way, they always do quite well as adults if they get their mind around it, because they're very, they're like little mini big people, because they grew up so fast and they were able to do things and handle things really quickly. And so they become the dismissive avoidance and the fearful avoidance. They usually tend to be quite successful because, you know, instead of relationships, they focus so much on their work and their jobs because that was an escape away from anything to do with emotional intensities. All right, guys, so I'm going to wrap that up right here. And I'll do another video speaking specifically about the anxious preoccupied. This is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor and your leverage for change. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.